Joe Pellegrino Jr. here with Robbins Pellegrino, a business brokerage firm. Today's episode was super interesting. We jumped into an industry spotlight on the landscape industry, which is a hot trending industry right now. If you are the owner of a landscape company, or you are interested in the landscape industry, interested in buying within that industry, this is definitely the episode for you. We got a lot of fun stuff. We'll see you there. All right, we are back after a little sabbatical over the last 4 weeks. It's been busy around here. We have a lot of stuff going on. Super exciting deals that are in progress right now, and man, we just can't wait to tell you about them as they come online. But today we are talking specifically about the landscape industry. We're going to do a little bit of an industry spotlight here, and kind of talk through the industry, talk through what buyers are looking for, and talk through what you can do as an owner of a landscape company to prepare for sale, and sort of what your prospects look like, right? Because this is an industry that's hot, especially in the state of Florida, and in the state of Florida, it's $14.6 billion industry, really a lot going on there. And it's no surprise if you know anything about Florida. Our offices are here in Naples and up in the Panhandle, and these are just very highly landscaped places. There are constantly people, even in the intersections of the road, constantly landscapers maintaining the grounds. And what I find most interesting about landscape that I didn't know before I got into this industry is that there's a very vast difference between if you're a lawnmower guy, if you're doing lawns and basic weeding, maintenance, things of that nature, versus landscape construction, landscape design, progressive landscaping, things like turf, things like hardscapes, like pavers. These are the sort of the difference makers that separate for lack of a better way of saying it, the men from the boys. So Chandler, what do you kind of see out of the industry these days? What do you kind of see in landscaping?
In general, I see some consolidation. So I see some smaller landscape firms getting bought out either by regional buyers. It is a hot industry, like Joe mentioned. So you've got interest from PE firms, from large regional buyers, and then just the individual, the entrepreneur that wants to go into business. That's I guess that maybe the one thing I like about landscape is that it's a good
Yeah.
industry that for anyone to intro into for a first time business, right? So you really get kind of the gamut of different potential buyers. But for the industry as a whole, it's hot right now, especially in Florida, Southeast, just across the country, really. But you definitely have this kind of approach where there are definitely larger groups looking to buy smaller firms, and then you've got PE interest in this. Really around the labor force, so it's also very contingent on your team and kind of what management you have or don't have in place. That's going to be kind of a common theme every time we get on here and talk to people. It's about what your manager structure is, and then your staff in place. And if those two things are in place, and it's in a landscape company, you're probably in a good place to exit if you want to. You've got the multiples are kind of on the higher end of the range right now, just because of where we are. But you've also got this, as we've mentioned previous times on here, this uncertainty with the market. So it's very contingent on what services are offered. So if you're just mowing grass versus everything that Joe just mentioned with the hardscape, with the additional services, commercial contracts, and all of that is going to play a big part right now in ultimately what your business gets sold for.
Yeah. What I've seen a lot of recently is, particularly here in Florida, I've seen a lot of artificial turf companies popping up, or landscape companies adding that on as a service. And it's funny because back in my day, like way back in the day, I had an artificial turf company here in Florida, and it didn't do very well because at the time the market acceptance for that product was pretty low. Um, but now, especially in the luxury areas,
Mm.
artificial and synthetic turf is really popping off. And that's such an easy thing for landscape companies to add on as a service, particularly if they're doing the hardscapes like pavers and things of that nature. It's the same prep process. And it's a really great way to drive value. Do you think that, are those the businesses that are really getting, are those the ones that are getting bought up in consolidation efforts?
Really, it's everybody, but I will say this that I would say the industry as a whole is kind of in a place where it's having to grow up a little bit, in the
Hmm.
sense that if you're just doing residential lawns, cutting 50 yards a month or something, it's getting a lot harder for you to make money and to keep staff. You're having to add more services. So that's what I'm seeing across the industry is that you're seeing kind of where maybe in years past and decades past, it was you could make a lot of money just cutting grass, fixing some sprinklers. You're now having to add a bunch of different services. Some of those artificial turf in metropolitan areas. Green still sells. So in the sense that you're having this nice 3-story house, there's not much of a yard, but throw in about 20 feet, 10 feet of artificial turf next to a small pool, and just the
Hmm.
idea, the vibe around that is helpful. So it's definitely, I would say, if you just do artificial turf, you're kind of on a whole class of your own. But if it's an added
Right.
service, it definitely helps. So, but that includes commercial. Pick your poison, as I would say. Do you want to just do residential yards? Are you wanting to work with new construction, doing HOAs, keeping up different neighborhoods? Or are you doing just commercial where you're going around and going on banks and hotels and different things like that? So it just really
Hmm.
depends. I guess my overarching point there is there are becoming less and less landscape companies that are simply just cutting grass.
Right.
That probably isn't going to get it anymore. Just it's being too
Well,
competitive. There's too many. It's too saturated just for you to cut grass and for you to make the amount of money that you're used to.
and realistically, the guys that are just cutting grass, it's not just hard to make money on it because it's so saturated. It's hard to make money on it because if I if I have the difference between paying $250 to cut my grass versus 45 minutes on a Saturday morning and doing it myself, as those prices go up, I'm much more likely to consider just taking care of it myself. My point is it's something that everybody and anybody can do. Whereas when you think about things like the hardscapes and even the sort of the horticultural type stuff
Yeah,
with
the
the
irrigation
correct
piece you
plants,
have to be. Oh yeah,
right? If you can provide that value, very, very few people are just doing those things themselves. It's funny, me and my wife had a conversation the other day about this exact topic. She wants to do something with our front yard. And I was like, oh, I'll do it. And she's like, you can't, you don't know how to, you don't know what plants work with which plants and which species invade others and
yeah.
all that. I'm
It's
like,
funny.
yeah,
My
fair enough.
wife must have called your wife because we had the same conversation. And I was like, I'll do it. She's like, no, you can't. And then I
Yep.
realized probably not.
Probably not. Yeah,
So
probably
it's
not.
definitely, but yeah, I think you make a good point that during this kind of in between on what the economy is going to do and not going to do, as
Hmm.
people kind of choose and elect what they're going to spend money on, it's really easy just to say, I'm going to cut the grass for a couple of months while
Right.
money's tight.
Right.
So, with that, talking about multiples and getting the highest multiple you can in your business, contracts are important in the landscaping industry. So, if you do residential, there's nothing wrong with that. Just you really want to have it to be contract based, meaning it's not just the nice old lady down the street that pays you $75 a month, but they're on an annual contract. So, at least for that 12-month period, you're getting that 75 and you multiply that by how many clients you have. So if you've got contracts like that in place, that's going to raise your multiple. If you've got some
Yeah.
diversity on the fact that you may do 200 homes in residential, but also some commercial contracts, that again is going to raise that multiple, diversifying that income stream so that if the economy were to turn on its head and you had a third of your residential contracts say, hey, I'm going to press pause, then it won't greatly affect your multiple if you've got some different incomes and different channels. Another thing I'm seeing a bunch of people move is just like with the gym membership or anything else, subscription, right? Just pay me a
Hmm.
flat and I'm going to make sure your grass is cut X amount of times, your sprinklers worked, your lawn pump primed when it's time, and all of that. And so moving to a subscription or a monthly billing is also important if you've got contracts.
Now, this is obviously an industry, and you referred to it earlier. This is obviously an industry that is very
Mm.
laborer intensive, and it's the importance of that team. Now, with a lot of landscape work, skilled labor isn't necessarily necessary, but as a result, you've got such a transient workforce.
You want infrastructure. Talking about that multiple, if you have a landscaping company and you're looking at selling anytime soon, here's a few things that you should look at. When you look across your labor channel, is it just a bunch of unskilled workers that you're having to harp on every day to get to where they need to go? Or is there some manager structure in place? Do you have a route supervisor, or do you have a general manager? Do you have office staff? Because if once you get to scale, once you get to any type of size, you need people taking care of people. And what's your involvement, right? So if you look back and reflect back, and you're sitting at your chair, going, okay, I might want to be done, but you put in 50 hours that week, and there's probably some adjustment that's going to be needed to be done for that multiple to go higher. Because the reason PE firm might walk away from it, or a big regional buyer may walk away from your company, is because it is all about you, right? It takes you having to be the general manager. It takes you having to run the staff. It takes you having to make sure that all the vehicles are maintained and the equipment and all of that. So if you've got some level of management, doesn't have to be a crazy amount, but a route supervisor, someone who's taking care of the billing and stuff like that. And it's not all you. You're just a much more attractive acquisition than if you were a one-man show that's absolutely killing it, right? That kudos to you, still can be sold, but you're going to get a little bit less for your business if it's just a one-man show.
Now, what about landscape companies that use like subcontracted teams? Is there a differential in value there versus the guys that employ their own staff?
Yes and no. So this is kind of a 9 times out of 10, the largest expense you're going to see in the landscaping industry is labor. And there's different ways to combat that, right? You can have labor that's yours 24/7, just have it all the time. Or you can have contract labor. You're probably going to pay a little bit more for the contract labor. You can also kind of let them go, get them in the spring and summer, and then you're letting them go in the fall and winter, and you're reducing it by your job capacity. It really is just dependent and contingent on what that does to your numbers. So in some cases, that's going to be helpful. In other cases, it's just there's no other way. You can't afford to have a full-time staff at the level that you would need to achieve what you're doing. So you do the subcontractors, but yet they're not as firm or as in concrete as maybe a standard labor force would be. So it really is very contingent on who ends up being the buyer for you. Too much of anything is bad. So don't go all contract labor, and don't go all, don't pay $500,000 and keep your staff there all year when they've got nothing to do from November to January. So you're just going to be mindful of what's best for you, where you are, what your volume is, and all of that. But it's a necessary. I think no one looks at a landscape company and says you shouldn't have any contract labor. That's just not realistic for the industry.
You mentioned, the seasonal aspect to it, right? And up in the Panhandle where your office is, it's that sort of November through January is sort of your slow time. Whereas down here in Naples, it's the opposite, right? Where that's big business time, and in the summer, it sort of decreases a little bit because it's so dang hot down here.
Yeah. It's like, but what can you do? Can you add pressure washing? Can you add other services that you can do that you can pick up in the fall, winter, if that's your off season, or wherever your shoulder season is. What services, what can you provide to your clients 12 months out of the year versus just 5 or 6 that the grass is going to grow crazy.
And that's the thing. If a landscape owner can keep that recurring revenue, keep those contracts running through the entire year, it's gonna put them ahead. Now, we've talked about in previous episodes the idea of certain levels of revenue accessing certain levels of multiple, right?
Sure.
So where do you see that sort of falling in the landscape industry? What are the numbers that like? What's a sweet spot kind of number from a revenue perspective?
Sweet spot, I'd say about $1.5 million to $2 million. That's going to be kind of your first threshold. If you're doing $1.5 million to $2 million revenue, you're going to get a little boost in that multiple. If you can get over 3 to 5, then you're really going to be more on that top end. Whether you're doing solely residential or commercial or a combination, that's strictly on the revenue side. But definitely over $1.5 million, and probably more realistic over 2. If you're doing $2 million or more, you're going to see a bump in your in the multiple that's ultimately going to go. And then I say this every time, almost to every business owner or in any industry: operate your landscape company as a true bona fide business. So take a salary, take a nice one, Um, Credit cards, I know they can be the devil, but if that means you get reoccurring, um, every month they hit on the first, that can be a good
Hmm.
thing. Don't, if you're doing a $500,000 or less and you're just wanting to take home $120,000, I understand why you did it that way. If you want to grow and move along, offer the credit cards to your client, offer that monthly subscription, offer the fact that you're going to have to pay yourself a good salary, and don't take a whole bunch of owner draws or anything like that. Show it up on the P&Ls so that
Yeah.
when you get ready to sell, you're able to do that. And I see that probably most common in landscaping.
It's an easy business to be really laxed about.
Right. So don't be, if you don't have a CPA, get one. Right. You don't have
Yeah.
to be this overly sophisticated operation, but you do need to be doing the best practices for any business and inside the industry. So that would be kind of my biggest thing if you're preparing to sell, is to look at what you're doing for your salary, how you're taking money in and out of the company, and what
Yeah.
it looks like is kind of a really big deal.
Now, what about the business, the landscape businesses that may not be super well put together, but they have a book of business? We've seen this a lot in the market where people are looking to sell their book of business, and there's not really much of an operation to sell. They're really just trying to sell their clients. What do you kind of have to say about that?
That is done. That it's possible. Understand that you're selling a book of business and not an operation at that point. So please don't ask for the same for the same number, right? So a book of business by nature is going to be less than a operating business. So just understand that and have an expectation there. But absolutely, if you don't have this overly sophisticated business in place, but you've got strong clients that have been with you for a number of years, there's absolutely money to be made there that you could sell to a local competitor. It's just not going to be at the rate at a standard business would be. But yeah, no, it's done, and it's done all the time. It's done
Yeah.
inside landscape, HVAC, any service business industry. You see where book of businesses are sold.
When we talk about the sort of consolidation that we've seen in the market recently, where firms are sort of buying up to consolidate, is that, just like real talk, is that the best option for a seller? Like, is that their best hope, or is it, do they want more of an individual buyer, an
No,
individual investor?
I think it's to be determined, right? I think the best
Sure.
bet for someone who's looking to exit the landscaping business is to make sure you have a solid operation. And if this sounds familiar, it's because I've said it in previous episodes. Have a solid foundation. Make sure your books are in order. Make sure that you are, whatever level of revenue you're at, are you happy there, or are you doing the work that you need to grow to get you to that next benchmark threshold or whatever, and then you're exiting? It's very well that a PE firm or private equity or a family office might be the option. I know of for myself, and then I've got 3 other broker friends right now, and those in the landscaping industry are selling to private offices or private equity. However, I also, it very well be that because the level of entry for the industry is so low, that it may be someone who's never, I've seen this a number of times over the years, is that these make great veteran-owned businesses. So
Mm,
you have someone who has served in the military for 10, 15, 20 years. They might be, 40 to 50 years old and not looking to retire, just have a second career. And they go, and the very first time they've entered entrepreneurship is in landscaping. And
yeah.
they are the best one because they've got, they normally have good credit and have lived stable lives, and they're able to get lending approval. So it very well be that they might be your best qualified buyer. So I can't say that it's the PE firm or because of the consolidation. It's really, have you done your work? Is your business in place? Is it got to the thresholds that you wanted it to? Has it achieved all that? And then now we go to exit. Because regardless of who ends up buying it, if you've done all of those things, you're going to achieve the dollar you want and the terms you need. It's
Right.
much more contingent on what you've done versus who ends up being the buyer. That's going to just be
100%.
based on the appetite, where you are, what's going on in the moment. But you do the work, you lay the groundwork, and ultimately you're gonna be able to get the exit you want based off
Yeah.
of your, which is nice, right? Because I'm a control freak, so I like the idea that if I do my job and I take care of my people and my clients are well served and I have a great reputation and all of that, that I can ultimately translate that into selling of the business, and it be
Yeah.
because of what I've done, not just very contingent of some mystery person that I have not met yet, don't know, and can't control.
No, I mean that makes a ton of sense. And a lot of the conversations that we generally have are centered around the sellers. For a prospective buyer, someone who's looking for an industry, like you said earlier, the landscape industry is a great place to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And what's also really cool about the landscape industry is there are so many verticals that you can
Sure.
go towards, right? There's so many ways that you can expand, and like we kind of talked about expanding sort of within landscape construction and adding hardscapes and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But even, it's a quick step over to pools. It's another quick step over to general contracting altogether, right? I mean, there's so many ways that you can go from landscaping, but by the same token, you can make a really good living building a landscaping empire. And especially when you're dealing with larger commercial contracts, especially when you're dealing with all things of that nature, it's a great industry to be in. And it's an industry that it's perennial, especially in the state of Florida. It's always around. It's always going to be around. And it's a great industry to be in. This is really good stuff. I think just sort of to recap, for prospective sellers, just kind of listening in, get your crap together. Make sure that you have everything in line. Make sure that you have the right infrastructure to your company, because ultimately that's what a buyer is going to be looking for. And that takes the form of having your financials in place. Make sure you have a CPA that's looking at your numbers and organizing them. Make sure that you have a solid labor force, whatever that looks like, whether that be a consistent flow of subcontractors, whether that be just reliable employees that you have a management figure over. These are really, really important things. And a lot of times these are things that you can kind of add on and, over the course of 6-12 months, sort of reorient the business. And then it becomes that much more sellable at that point. But at the end of the day, if you own a landscape company, particularly if you're doing more than $1.5 million in revenue per year, and you feel like you check a lot of these boxes off as it relates to infrastructure and having your crap together, so to speak, give us a call. We would love the opportunity to value your business. We'd love the opportunity to take a look at your numbers, tell you what we believe fair market value is, and ultimately what we believe we could sell it for. It's a totally no obligation situation. We love doing it. We love pouring over these numbers, and man, you might just be worth more than you ever thought you could be.
I tell people all the time, you're always worth more than you think.
Yeah, and I
Good
think in
stuff.
this industry, is that the blue collar guy that's running his landscape company is probably going to be a little more. He's probably going to be undervaluing his business. He doesn't realize what all he can get for it, and that even that somebody desperately wants it, and somebody is ready to put money
Sure.
into that. That's out there, and I would love for that to be you, listener. So that about wraps us up for today, and we will see you next week. We're going to be back here next week with some really cool insights on our next topic. So thank you very much.